I still remember the first time I saw her, the thin, loud perfume-wearing blonde girl who walked into the company anniversary dinner acting like she owned the whole place, and the moment she stepped closer to my husband Sean, my heart felt a strange jolt, not because I was jealous, but because I was not stupid. I was 53, I had seen the world, I had felt the shift in people when they had hidden intentions, and this girl had a whole ocean full of intentions shining in her eyes. I stood next to Sean holding my clutch when she came up with her fake sweet smile and her long nails painted bloody red, and she said, her voice dripping with sugar, "Oh Sean, you made it. I was hoping you would not ditch the dinner like last time." And then she looked at me like I was a piece of furniture standing next to him, like I was some forgotten lamp in the corner. I waited for her to say something to me, maybe a hello, maybe a simple nice to meet you, nothing. Sean cleared his throat a little and introduced me. "This is my wife Marlene," but the girl barely nodded her head and laughed, and started telling him a story about how the office printer almost exploded today, and how she managed to fix it, and how everyone said she was a hero, and all I could think was, girl, you pressed the reset button, calm down. I watched her all night, the way she leaned close when she talked to him, the way she flicked her hair, the way she touched his arm every 2 minutes, as if she needed the contact to survive, oxygen, the way she pretended not to notice how uncomfortable it made me, and yet she continued like I was invisible, like I did not exist, like Sean belonged to her, or she believed she had some sort of invisible claim over him. On the drive home, I stayed quiet. I knew better than to start accusing anyone without evidence, and I knew Sean, he was loyal, but he was also naive, sometimes professionally kind-hearted, bending over backwards to help people like her, thinking everyone had good intentions, but I knew this girl did not. When we got home, he loosened his tie and asked softly, "Are you okay tonight? You were quiet." I told him honestly, "I don't like that girl. The way she acts around you is not normal." And Sean laughed, not mocking, just innocent, and told me, "She is new, she is enthusiastic. Don't worry, Marlene." But I knew better. Enthusiasm does not involve touching married men like they are your personal stress toys. The next week things got worse. Sean came home telling me stories about how she brought him coffee even though he did not ask for it, how she stayed late for a meeting with him, how she constantly complimented his work, and how she kept telling everyone around the office that Sean was her favorite mentor. I asked him, does she talk to other women in the office or only men? And he said, I don't know, I guess mostly me. She asks a lot of questions. Then he shrugged like it was harmless. I pretended to smile, but my mind was already sharpening like a blade, because if someone tries to break my home, they learn quickly that a 53-year-old woman is not weak. She is experienced. She knows how to fight battles quietly, patiently, and without losing her dignity. One morning, I packed Sean's lunch and slipped a little note inside, telling him I loved him and reminding him dinner was his favorite dish. And when he came home that night, he told me weirdly that his coworker found the note first because she reached into his lunch bag for a fork she claimed she needed, and she read it and giggled and said, your wife is really trying to keep things cute." On the drive home, I stayed quiet. I knew better than to start accusing anyone without evidence, and I knew Sean, he was loyal, but he was also naive, sometimes professionally kind-hearted, bending over backwards to help people like her, thinking everyone had good intentions, but I knew this girl did not. When we got home, he loosened his tie and asked softly, "Are you okay tonight? You were quiet." I told him honestly, "I don't like that girl. The way she acts around you is not normal." And Sean laughed, not mocking, just innocent, and told me, "She is new, she is enthusiastic. Don't worry, Marlene." But I knew better. Enthusiasm does not involve touching married men like they are your personal stress toys. The next week things got worse. Sean came home telling me stories about how she brought him coffee even though he did not ask for it, how she stayed late for a meeting with him, how she constantly complimented his work, and how she kept telling everyone around the office that Sean was her favorite mentor. I asked him, does she talk to other women in the office or only men? And he said, I don't know, I guess mostly me. She asks a lot of questions. Then he shrugged like it was harmless. I pretended to smile, but my mind was already sharpening like a blade, because if someone tries to break my home, they learn quickly that a 53-year-old woman is not weak, she is experienced. She knows how to fight battles quietly, patiently, and without losing her dignity. One morning, I packed Sean's lunch and slipped a little note inside telling him I loved him and reminding him dinner was his favorite dish. And when he came home that night, he told me weirdly that his coworker found the note first because she reached into his lunch bag for a fork she claimed she needed, and she read it and giggled and said, your wife is really trying to keep things cute. Trying to keep things cute, the nerve. That night something in me sparked alive. I was not losing my husband, not to some office girl with cheap perfume and zero boundaries. I was going to show her who she was messing with, but I would not scream, I would not fight dirty, I would defeat her with elegance and intelligence, auntie style. The next day, I woke up early, straightened my hair, wore my deep blue dress that made me look powerful, and walked into Sean's office building unannounced. I brought donuts for everyone because when you walk into enemy territory, you don't walk weak, you walk like a queen. And the moment I entered the floor, I spotted her leaning over Sean's desk laughing at something on his screen, her hand almost brushing his shoulder until she noticed me approaching, and something in her face dropped a fraction of a second before she replaced it with a fake smile. "Oh, hi," she said, as if she had forgotten my name, which I knew she hadn't, but she wanted to act dumb. Sean looked surprised, but happy to see me, and I kissed his cheek in front of her just to remind the room who exactly I was, and why I was there, the wife, the queen, the original. I smiled politely at her and said, "I'm sorry, I never caught your name last time." She blinked a little too fast and said, "It's Kelsey." I nodded slowly, letting the silence breathe around us. "Kelsey, the woman acting overly familiar with my husband. Nice to meet you properly," I said calmly, while handing donuts to the entire team. I watched her face as everyone swarmed around the box laughing, thanking me, showing appreciation, while she stood in the corner looking like someone had just unplugged her spotlight. I was not done, not even close. When I left the office, Sean texted me saying everyone loved the donuts and that I made his day, and Kelsey sent a message to the team chat saying thank you Marlon, or whatever your name was, and a fire lit inside me because she knew my name. She absolutely knew. The next few days, she tried harder, texting Sean late at night, pretending it was work-related, asking him about tiny tasks that could easily wait until morning, sending him memes, calling him mentor, sending voice notes, giggling in every sentence. And then one night I saw a message pop on his phone as he showered. "Sean, you deserve someone who really sees you, not someone who takes you for granted." My blood froze, but my spirit steadied, because now I had real proof, real fire to fight with, and her game was about to end. This was no longer a suspicion, this was war. And I was going to win. The message burned in my mind like wildfire, but I did not panic, I did not scream, I did not storm into the bathroom to confront Sean. I sat on the edge of the bed and breathed slowly, because a woman who has lived 53 years knows that the worst mistake is reacting too fast. You wait, you think, you move only when the moment is perfect. When Sean came out of the shower, I pretended everything was normal. I asked him about work, cooked dinner, and talked about the weather, as if I had not seen that poison-filled message waiting for him on the screen, and he behaved like everything was absolutely fine because he had no idea what storm was forming inside me. That night after he fell asleep, I took my phone, opened a blank document, and started planning not revenge, but exposure, clean, open, unavoidable truth, because I did not want to hurt Sean. I wanted him to see reality with his own eyes, and I wanted her mask to fall off so violently that she would never dare to look at a married man again. The next day, I woke up early, packed Sean's lunch, added a sweet note, again not for him, but for her, because I knew she would try to look inside that bag again. I wrote, "You are my heart, thank you for loving me every day," and I smiled, because I knew exactly how it would land in her gut. By noon, I got a text from Sean, a little confused, saying Kelsey thought the note was cute, but unnecessary, and she said maybe we were overcompensating for something. My hands tightened around my phone because she was trying to create insecurity, trying to plant doubt, trying to act like our marriage was fragile, but she had no idea what kind of woman she was dealing with. That afternoon, I decided I had waited long enough. I called my friend Lila, who worked part-time as an event decorator, and asked her to get me 2 visitor badges for the corporate building. She had contacts, and within an hour I had them because if a woman wants something, she finds a way. The next morning, I walked into the office again, but this time quietly staying in the background, watching, listening, observing the way a hunter observes before striking, and what I saw made every instinct inside me tighten like steel. There she was, standing too close to Sean again, holding her coffee cup like she was in a romantic comedy, tilting her head, laughing at something he said, and then leaning in, whispering something in his ear while touching his wrist lightly as if she had any right at all. Sean moved his hand back quickly, clearly uncomfortable, but she did not stop. She giggled again, reached for a folder on his desk, and brushed her fingers against his in a way that no coworker should ever do, and my jaw clenched hard because she was crossing boundaries with the confidence of someone who believed she would not get caught. I took a slow, silent breath and stepped forward, announcing my presence with a calm, gentle voice. "Good morning, everyone," and the entire room turned, including Sean, who looked pleasantly surprised, and her, who looked like someone had thrown cold water down her back. "Hi, Marlene," Sean said, walking toward me with a soft smile. "What are you doing here?" I looked directly at him and said, "I thought we could have lunch today." And then I looked at her with the calmest, most dangerous smile and said, "And I wanted to see how things are going with all the new team members. It is always nice to meet the people who work so closely with my husband." Kelsey blinked rapidly like she had been punched by pure politeness and fixed her hair with unnecessary energy while pretending not to care, her lips twitching the entire time. Sean put his arm around my shoulder gently and said, "Sure, let's go to lunch," and I smiled warmly up at him while keeping her in my peripheral vision, and she glared at me with a look that screamed she was losing control of her little fantasy world. During lunch, I told Sean softly that I felt weird about how close she acted, and he looked surprised, confused, and a little troubled, but he said he would keep more distance, and I believed him because he was not the problem, she was. But I still had to expose her. 2 days later, the moment I needed came on its own, like fate was working for me. Kelsey sent Sean another late-night message, and this time I watched him check his phone, frown, and say, "Why does she send these at midnight?" He did not reply, and simply put the phone down, and that gave me the perfect opening. I said, "Sean, can I see something for a moment?" And he handed me the phone without hesitation because he had nothing to hide, and I opened the message and read it aloud. "Sean, I do not understand why someone as amazing as you would stay in a relationship that seems so routine. You deserve someone who admires you always and sees who you truly are." His eyes widened and he looked horrified and said, "I swear I had no idea she was writing this. I thought she was asking about work. I never invited this." I trusted him, I truly did, but I also knew this was the moment to move. I said calmly, "Sean, I think you need to talk to HR, but before that, let me handle something in a way only another woman can." The next day, I dressed perfectly again, walked into the office, and waited until she was alone in the break room preparing her coffee, humming to herself like she was the star of her own movie, and then I stepped inside silently and her humming died instantly. "Oh," she said, forcing a smile. "You again?" "Yes, me," I replied, stepping closer, keeping my tone soft, polite, controlled the way a queen speaks before issuing a decree. "I think we should have a little talk, woman to woman." She straightened her posture, lifted her chin like she was preparing for battle, and said, "Sure, what about?" I looked her directly in the eyes, not blinking, not wavering, and said, "I saw your messages, the ones you sent my husband." Her face turned pale, then pink, then white again, shifting colors like an LED light malfunctioning. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I continued, "You're young, so let me teach you something. When you go after a married man, remember one thing: the wife always finds out, because wives are not stupid and women my age have instincts sharper than knives." She swallowed hard, her coffee cup trembling slightly in her hand, and tried to say, "I think you misunderstood," but I raised my hand gently, stopping her, not aggressively, not loudly, just clearly. No misunderstanding, I said calmly. You crossed a line, and you knew you were crossing it. I do not blame you for admiring my husband. He is a good man. But I blame you for disrespecting our marriage and acting like I was invisible. Her face tightened with silent anger, her jaw pinched like she hated being confronted. I leaned just a little closer and said, and let me say this once, if you text him again about anything that is not strictly work-related, I will personally make sure HR sees every message, every voice note, every inappropriate comment you made in the office. I will not shout about it. I will not fight with you, but I promise you will lose what you value most: your position, your reputation, and the illusion that you can take something that never belonged to you. She stood frozen like someone had hit pause on her entire system, and she whispered, "You can't prove anything." I smiled slowly, the way a woman smiles when she already won, and said, "I do not need to prove it. I only need the truth, and you already exposed yourself with your own messages." Her hand shook again, but I walked away before she could respond because the conversation was over and she knew it. That evening when Sean came home, he told me she barely spoke to him all day, kept her distance, did not bring him coffee, did not linger, did not try to touch him, and barely made eye contact. And I knew that was only the beginning of her downfall. Because part 3 would change everything. For the next 2 days, the office felt strangely calm. Sean told me every evening that she was keeping distance, avoiding conversations, giving one-word replies, and spending most of her time clicking around her computer, pretending to be busy, and it made me almost laugh, because people think exposure requires shouting or fighting. No, exposure simply requires truth placed in front of the right person at the right time, and she had seen that truth in my eyes. But I knew girls like her, they never give up without one final desperate move, and I was right, because Wednesday afternoon I received a message from an unknown number saying, "We need to talk. Marlene, I'm at the cafe across from the office. Come alone, it is important." I stared at the message for a moment, and a slow, amused smile grew on my face, because she still did not understand. She still thought she had some kind of power left. She still thought she could intimidate me or manipulate something. But I was too old, too experienced, too aware to fall into her little traps. So I went. When I entered the cafe, she was sitting at a corner booth trying to look confident, but her leg was shaking under the table, and the moment she saw me, she straightened her back, lifted her chin, and tried to mask her tension with attitude. "You came," she said, forcing a brave tone. "Of course," I replied, sitting across from her. "I am not afraid of you." She flinched slightly at my calm tone and leaned forward with a fake smirk. "Look, I think there is some confusion. I'm not trying to steal your husband. I'm just trying to help him grow professionally. And I thought maybe you were insecure seeing someone young and ambitious around him." I almost laughed out loud because her little speech was so predictable, so rehearsed, like she had practiced it in the mirror, imagining she sounded powerful, but she did not. She sounded desperate. I leaned forward too, matching her posture except with real confidence, and said, "Let me also be honest with you. I am not insecure at all. I am observant, and you made your intentions very clear. You touched him unnecessarily. You texted him at midnight. You tried to create emotional dependency, and you whispered things that only someone with hidden motive whispers." Her eyes flickered with annoyance, and she crossed her arms, saying, "You act like he's perfect, like he never gave me attention." I tilted my head slowly. "I never said he was perfect. I said he was loyal, and there is a difference. A loyal man can still be polite, and kindness is not a weakness, but you confused kindness with interest." Her jaw tightened, anger flashing in her eyes, because the truth never sits well with someone who lives in fantasy. Suddenly she snapped, "You think you're so much better than me just because you're older and married and he respects you." I raised one eyebrow, not rudely, not mocking, just naturally. "And you think you're his future just because you're young and wearing perfume strong enough to kill mosquitoes in a 5-mile radius." She froze, shocked, because she did not expect me to be sharp. She expected me to be emotional or shaking or weak. She underestimated everything about me, and now she was seeing the real me for the first time. Then she said quietly, "You know he deserves more appreciation, more excitement, more spark." I looked straight into her eyes without blinking and replied, "You are mistaking drama for spark. You are mistaking attention seeking for appreciation. You are mistaking boundaries for obstacles. And worst of all, you are mistaking a married man for an opportunity." She stared at me, breathing a little harder, like the weight of my words was settling on her chest. So I continued, "And I will tell you the truth. You are not in love with him. You are in love with the idea of winning, the idea of proving you can take something from someone older than you, but you can't because he is not something to take." Her lips tightened and she looked away, frustrated, humiliated, exposed in a way she could not escape. Finally, she whispered, "Why are you here? What do you want?" "Your honesty," I replied, and her eyes snapped back to mine. "I want you to admit why you really started this, because once you say it, it loses power and this whole illusion will break." She swallowed hard, her throat moving slowly, and then, after a long, heavy silence, she whispered something so small, so fragile, that I almost felt pity for her. "He pays attention to me," she said, barely audible. "He listens to me. He notices when I'm stressed. He asks if I'm okay. Nobody does that." She froze, shocked, because she did not expect me to be sharp. She expected me to be emotional or shaking or weak. She underestimated everything about me, and now she was seeing the real me for the first time. Then she said quietly, "You know he deserves more appreciation, more excitement, more spark." I looked straight into her eyes without blinking and replied, "You are mistaking drama for spark. You are mistaking attention seeking for appreciation. You are mistaking boundaries for obstacles. And worst of all, you are mistaking a married man for an opportunity." She stared at me, breathing a little harder, like the weight of my words was settling on her chest. So I continued, "And I will tell you the truth. You are not in love with him. You are in love with the idea of winning, the idea of proving you can take something from someone older than you, but you can't because he is not something to take." Her lips tightened and she looked away, frustrated, humiliated, exposed in a way she could not escape. Finally, she whispered, "Why are you here? What do you want?" "Your honesty," I replied, and her eyes snapped back to mine. "I want you to admit why you really started this, because once you say it, it loses power and this whole illusion will break." She swallowed hard, her throat moving slowly, and then, after a long, heavy silence, she whispered something so small, so fragile, that I almost felt pity for her. "He pays attention to me," she said, barely audible. "He listens to me. He notices when I'm stressed. He asks if I'm okay. Nobody does that." The next morning started like any other, quiet, ordinary, peaceful, but the air felt different, like something heavy was about to break open, and by noon it did, because Sean called me from the office with a tension in his voice that told me this day was not going to end calmly. He said, "Marlene, something happened. You might want to hear this." And I told him in listening, and his voice dropped a little lower, the way it does when he is trying not to lose his temper. He said, "HR called me this morning. Apparently someone filed a complaint against Kelsey," and suddenly everything inside me went still, but not surprised, because truth always travels even when no one says a word. I asked him what happened, and he sighed, rubbing his forehead. I could hear it through the phone. He said she got into an argument with her teammate. Apparently her teammate confronted her about being unprofessional around me, and she snapped and said things she should not have said, and the whole floor heard it. I closed my eyes quietly, imagining the scene, her losing control, her mask cracking in front of everyone, her little fantasy world shattering. Sean continued, she said, "You all know he likes me, you all know he prefers talking to me over anyone else," and she tried to drag my name into some sort of imaginary storyline. I took a slow, deep breath, because I knew it was only a matter of time before reality hit her hard, and today was the day. Sean said, and HR asked me what was going on, so I showed them everything, the late night messages, the personal comments, everything, and they called her in for questioning, and she panicked and said she was just seeking guidance and that she thought I needed someone more understanding than my wife. My blood warmed, but not with anger, more with clarity, because this was her final unraveling in public, not because of me, not because of Sean, but because she exposed herself. Sean said quietly, "They are letting her go, Marlene. They are terminating her at the end of the day, and she is packing her things now." I felt a wave of silence pass through me, not joy, not cruelty, just relief and a deep, calm understanding that the truth had finally reached where it needed to reach. That afternoon, I went to the office one last time, not to confront her, not to celebrate, not to kick someone already down. I went because I wanted closure, the kind a woman deserves after surviving silent battles with grace. When I stepped off the elevator, she was standing near her desk with a small cardboard box, her hands trembling as she placed her things inside one by one: her photo frame, her pens, her little fake plant, her coffee cup with lipstick marks on it, everything she had used to build her little world around my husband. She looked up and saw me, and for a moment her face twisted with embarrassment, pain, anger, regret, and something like shame. She whispered, "Why are you here?" I stepped closer, not too close, but close enough for her to hear everything clearly, and said, "I came because I wanted you to know something before you leave this place and start wherever life takes you next." Her throat tightened and she looked away, blinking hard. I said calmly, "You lost your job not because of me, not because of Sean, but because of your choices, and I hope you learn from this and build something better for yourself, because you do not need to chase taken men to feel valuable, you need to find value in yourself." She nodded, swallowing her pride, her voice small, when she whispered, "I never meant for it to go this far." I replied softly, "You did when you allowed it to, and now you know the cost." She wiped her cheeks, quickly hiding the tears that were forming, and she whispered, "I'm sorry." I did not need her apology, but I accepted it for her sake. "You can do better next time," I said gently. "You're not a bad person, you just made choices that hurt others, but you can grow from this." She nodded again, hugging her box to her chest like a shield, and walked away without looking back, and I watched her go, because sometimes the end of a story is not a dramatic explosion, sometimes it is simply someone walking away with their lessons heavy on their shoulders. When Sean came out of his office, he looked exhausted, but relieved. He walked up to me and wrapped his arms around me right there in the hallway in front of everyone, and said, "Thank you for handling this better than anyone else would have. You saved me, you saved us, and I love you more than you know." I leaned into him and whispered, "You did nothing wrong, you were just kind to the wrong person, and kindness is not a crime." He held my hand as we walked out of that building, and something inside both of us felt stronger, more grounded, more connected, because we had survived something silent yet powerful, and it had made our bond sharper, deeper, and unbreakable. That evening we sat on the porch watching the sun go down, the sky glowing orange and soft like it was washing away the last pieces of chaos, and Sean said, "I never understood how people could fall into emotional traps like that, but now I see how someone lonely can twist things in their mind." I replied gently, "The world is full of people looking for love in the wrong places. But what matters is knowing the difference between attention and affection, between fantasy and reality, between boundaries and disrespect." He turned to me with the warmest look in his eyes, the look a husband gives his wife when he finally sees everything she did for him, everything she protected, everything she defended, without losing herself. He said, "Marlene, you showed me today how strong you really are." I smiled softly, feeling a warmth bloom inside me, and replied, "I was always strong, you just never had a reason to see it until now." And that night when we closed the door to our home, I felt something deep settle inside me, not victory, not triumph, not pride, something even bigger. Peace. Because I had fought for my marriage without shouting, without losing my dignity, without turning bitter. I had stayed firm, calm, strategic, graceful, the way a woman with experience fights battles. And I had shown a girl who thought she could erase me exactly who runs this house and why. And that was the real ending. Our ending. Strong, loud, quiet, peaceful, all at once.